Today on The Truth as We Know It, we'll be discussing the video Respecting Beliefs, Why We Should Do No Such Thing by Theramin Trees, a British YouTube channel. To view the video, go to YouTube and then search for Respecting Beliefs, Why We Should Do No Such Thing. Look for this video, click it, and play. I don't want to get into really sensitive areas. If it's something that somebody's not comfortable talking about, that's fine. But I just want to begin by sharing my experience, which is when I get with certain groups of people, there are assumptions made. Let's all join hands and pray to Jesus. And nobody likes to be, well, what the hell are you doing that for? If you recall when we had a little campfire this year, I think Steve Eilers got after my friend Joe Bobrowski. And I think Steve was kind of primed for that, jumping on him and saying, well, which God is that? What, challenging him in a rather abrupt way. And I don't like that. I don't like to, make people feel uncomfortable about it. But on the other hand, I don't like the presumption that I agree with them. So that's kind of where I was at. It's not just talking about religions. It can apply in politics and other areas as well. So before we engage in it, just tell me how you feel about the subject, whether it's something you'd like to discuss, and we can proceed from there.
Well, I don't have any problem discussing it. I did think the guy simplified things a little bit, and maybe his tone wasn't great, but I think there was a lot of good points he was making about if they're trying to guilt you into an agreement that if you respect my beliefs, I'll respect yours. Those points that the video was making. And, I'm not exactly an atheist, but I'm certainly not a organized religion guy. I guess that's a result of my 16 years of Catholic education. Got me right to the point where
we're all guilty of that.
Right.
No. And for sure, if you people who take the literal interpretation of the Bible, there's a lot of things that we don't think should be part of a religious belief. But I think there's while I'm not a complete atheist, I'm more of a big uncertainty kind of guy. They're just a way of knowing anything.
Yeah.
And so what's important is, everybody's going through life. You've got pain, you got uncertainty, you've got work. We all have a lot of work we have to do. But we need to look at respecting, that's where I am anyway. You respect everybody else, not that you accept their religious beliefs, but you have to respect them as more like a humanistic, the golden rule, treat them like you want to be treated and love your neighbor as yourself. I think those are good things. And actually, I think there's some benefits to the Catholic upbringing. Sins are sins, maybe. They're not going to they're not going to be a black mark on my soul and send me to hell, but they still might not be the right thing to do for the reasons of respect people, and you love them. You're not going to treat them the way you do if you're sinning. So I'm not uncomfortable talking about any of this because it's not stepping on any of my pet peeves or strongly held beliefs.
Larry?
I'm fine with it too. I left organized religion sometime probably pre-college, didn't quite know it yet. but it hasn't been a part of my life for a long, long time. There are people that I know that I'm very close to are very religious and, you know, really into that, and it's an important part of their lives. And I've made a conscious decision. I think I have a rationale as to why that particular point of view that they have so deeply held isn't necessarily supported by evidence or by the reality that I see. And I guess I'm hubristic enough to think that if I were to express that to them, that it would somehow, you know, shake them up.
Yeah.
But I avoid doing that. I don't challenge people in that regard, because I feel like if I did that and they had and it didn't move them, but it just antagonized them, that it would just be damaging to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just not a win-win there for me. I have a cousin that I've mentioned before who we talk politics. She's right, I'm left. And at one time, she's very religious, very spiritual. She hangs around the Catholic Church because it offers her things that that she likes, but she has her own interpretation of what that really is. And she asked me once, sent me an email saying, "We never talked about religion, so I want, and I know you're not a believer, so are you a?" She listed 4 different types of people who don't believe in God. And so I gave her back, you know, a long epistle of, you know, my thoughts and feelings about this. And she wrote back and she said, "Oh, you're number 2. Number 2 is, well, you just haven't found that you need that."
Yeah, take a number, take a seat.
Probably the closest thing. So I'm very comfortable discussing that.
Okay.
I did feel like the guy catastrophized things a great deal, and really took the worst examples and case histories of things that could happen, have happened as a result of over religious endeavors, and made them the new rule. And certainly there's a lot there, but I didn't feel like he did really spend much time on what it does for an individual on a personal level.
The title of it was Respecting Beliefs, and the subtitle is Why You Should Never Do That.
Yeah.
And the premise is basically, you know, you're asked to give someone, I don't know what you would call it, the largesse to believe whatever it is they want to believe, and you're supposed to respect them, and they'll respect you in return. And yet, there's sometimes when you, in your heart, you really don't believe. I would take something like climate change or election deniers or any of these things, where it's not a matter of having equal points on both sides. It's clearly, you know, the other way, but it does touch, you know, very heavily. It comes from an atheist, and it's pretty heavy-handed as far as religion is concerned. But I thought he did it in a rather impassioned or a rather unimpassioned way. He was stating, you know, what he thought were the facts, and I thought it was interesting as a basis for discussion. Not just, as I say, not just religion, but other issues as well. Is how can you engage with someone without, you know, without giving in to their presumptions? And that's something that I personally have struggled with. That I mentioned to Larry and Steve, that on occasion I get together with a group and they all want to join hands and pray at the beginning of the meeting. I was, you know, okay, I'm stick my hands out. I don't say, you know, I really don't buy into this. You know, this is not for me, because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And yet, on the other hand, they don't seem to give a shit about my feelings. You know, it's like, yeah, but it is the presumption in a lot of cases that these are, you know, the Bible is absolutely literally true, and if you don't believe it, you're going to have to prove it. Whereas I would say, I'm willing to believe anything if you show me the proof, show me evidence to it. And I'll believe in Bigfoot if I see the right kind of evidence, but don't ask me to believe it because you believe it. Yes. So,
you know, Mike, anyway, in a lot of cases, it becomes a measure of how much we can trust you, or they can trust you.
Yeah.
So if you don't have these core beliefs that morality, at least, then they're not sure where you are and whether you're on the good or the bad side of the evil equation.
Mhm.
And my experience, the last job I had for 25 years, the people that ran the business, it was a family-owned business, and they were really big time Southeast Christian folks, and not coincidentally, a lot of them, the other management team were similar. And when they would when we go to lunch, they would ask, "Do you mind if I say the blessing?" And no one would disagree with the owner of the business about whether he could say the blessing. Everybody was on board with that. But in the course of that, I was the HR VP, so I got to see how people were treated. And I never did see that the religion, whether you were this religion or that religion, factored into whether a person survived or thrived. It was all based on business, because they would fire their fellow church member just as fast as they'd fire anybody else. If they didn't perform, then they would,
It's about money.
We'll see you in church.
Yeah, it's about money. This is money, and I'll see you in church.
That's right. It was about,
religion's okay, but money is money, right?
That's right.
I think I shared with you guys my experiences with this. I have a neighbor, a retired lieutenant colonel, who's a little younger than I am, but not much. He's invited me over. There's meetings of friends, and I got into some discussion over there. They're all uniformly religious, deep religious, and they are very conservative. They are Trump voters. We've gotten into a little bit of that. And in fact, I got myself into trouble because one woman said she was never going to come again because of me. Because I said, that doesn't make sense to me. So I got a little stronger with her, and boy, she was gone. So I thought, well, that's going to make me persona non grata at this group. Mm-hmm. But I went on, and then the COVID abandoned the group. Now I meet with these 4 religious guys, one a young pastor. They're all Christian. 3 of them, one of me. I enjoy it because we dip into the Bible. They use me for Catholic positions. Why do you do that? They say. Well, so I'm kind of their emissary. And in fact, a nun friend, a theologian, I had joined me once so she could answer their questions in more depth. They were very kind to her, but they didn't want to go very much into depth. I also have 2 ex-cons who are very conservative. So we get into discussions. We talk about that stuff. Another neighbor he's a Republican light, but a very close friend. So it's not that I haven't had some pretty good experiences with these people. Once you get into politics, though, once it enters into that, you got to be very careful, in my experience. Feelings are going to get hurt. Voices are going to start to rise. That's the first sign that, disagreement. I don't know how you do it. You just have to kind of remove your emotional and your reactionary. It's almost like being a Buddhist and say, "Oh, you believe that? Well, okay, I see. But that doesn't get you anywhere because you really can't engage without engaging. So it's very frustrating in my experience. Nonetheless, I keep at it, and I try to do that, and I'm always open. In fact, Bob, this is interesting, the lieutenant colonel, he will often bait it with this thing that Jesus did, or what Paul says to the Ephesians here, it reminds me of some social situation, which is clearly a conservative, progressive debate. So he kind of tries to feed it in. And I sometimes feel like he's baiting me to see if he can get me to enter in. I do as gently as I can. I'm not going to pretend that I'm who I'm not. They don't understand why I'm so resistant to accepting Jesus as my Lord and Savior. saved forever. I said, I can't do that. I said, I can pretend with you guys if you want me to, but I said, I'm not going to do that. If I don't believe it, if I can't say it honestly, I'm not going to say anything here. That's how I deal with it all.
You mentioned the military people. I don't know if anybody has had that experience, but I used to be in a men's group. I seem to move from one to another over the years, but I used to meet with a prayer group at Holy Trinity on Saturday mornings, and I was the youngest guy in this group by about 20 years, and all these guys have passed since then. But I always figured you want to hang out with older people. They might know something. Younger people don't know anything. But most of them had been in the military, and the odd thing is, none of them wanted to talk about it very much.
The military.
The people who had actually been engaged in combat, they didn't want to talk about that. But there was one guy, one of them, who hadn't really done that. He was in the military, but he was kind of in the back. He wanted to talk about it. And that's been my experience, that people who really are not fully aware, don't really truly understand the whatever it is, whether it's religion or warfare, if they don't truly understand it, they can wax on about it. We used to, we call them chicken hawks, that they will go on and talk about it. Whereas the people who have a genuine understanding of it don't push it very hard. And I have found the same thing with religion. I like to say that Christian is an adjective, not a noun. That you aren't a Christian, but you can behave in a Christian way. So that's the argument I always make to them, is that, no, I'm not a Christian, but I respect the principles and I try to follow those principles as best I can. But I'm not a Christian where some church dumps a whole series of dogma on me and I'm supposed to buy it. And I did want to share along that line just briefly. I ran into this at Trinity when I was there. I may have mentioned this once before, but we had a faculty meeting, and the theology department there was kind of in a turmoil because they had gotten word that some of the teachers were talking about things that didn't agree with Catholic dogma. So they were going to straighten us out on this and tell us exactly what dogma was, so you knew what to say to the kids. So we did, and they talked about it, and everybody just kind of sat there. And afterwards they said, now, if you have any questions, email them in to us. So I emailed something in about, I don't really accept things like the Immaculate Conception or, some of these things that I've always considered non-essential. And I got jumped on for that. But I found out I was the only one who had sent in an email. So it wasn't that everybody agreed with them. It was, they didn't care. They were there to teach. They didn't care about the religion. They were coaching football or teaching science or whatever it was. They didn't engage in it. So as they say, the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. So a lot of people are indifferent to it. And I could never be that way. I either had to be in or out. So I was in for a long time. I went through the full, the whole thing. I wasn't in a religious training as you were, Dave, but I all the Catholic schools and parish council president and all that kind of stuff, and the I don't know, the Renew program, all that sort of stuff. And I kept looking for that part of it that is, let's not worry about the dogma. Let's talk about how we treat each other, what we can do for each other. Right. And that's what, when I read the text of the New Testament, that's what I see. It's like, hey, don't ostracize the leper, accept them. Don't hate the person who's violating it. Try to show them some love. So I go along, as the irony for me is I go along with most of the teaching. I agree with it, but it's the church itself that I have problems with. And it's because many people like me have just abandoned the church, and what's left behind are those fundamentalists who, I'm not saying they're bad people, but I don't think they really understand the message. Oh, anyway.
Well, you put that extremely well. Back in the day, and I'm talking about seminary days, nobody was challenging the theologians, the theology that we were being taught at a school like Bellarmine, Loras College in Dubuque, a diocesan, well, it was the archdiocesan college, but people came from even as far as Chicago and those parts of Illinois and Wisconsin to that seminary. You know, people just didn't question it. We accepted it. And, you know, you all grew up Catholic, right? So you know how it used to be in our day. My sense today is there's a lot more rebellion, maybe not rebellion as, well, so you say, like you said, Mike, way ahead of your time. You said Immaculate Conception, well, that's a sideline, you know. True or not, you know, it's not center in what we think and what we ought to be doing. Today, it's just out, you know. Cafeteria Catholics rule a lot of the world, and the rest of them are these fundamentalists who say, you know, lock, stock, and barrel. You know, if the church says it, that's the way it is, and by God, I'm having nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. I understand the Trinity from a couple of close friends I have, that a lot of tennis players, this guy's a tennis player, so there's tennis players, a bunch of them from Trinity. He said they are all the most conservative Republican types that you can come across. I hate going, but, you know, I play tennis with them, so I got to deal with them. I don't know if you think that's true or not, but even this 107-year-old guy says, he said, there's a lot of people up there who it's lock, stock, and barrel, this belief. He's nuanced. He's a bit of a cafeteria, but really very faithful, the 107-year-old guy. My friend from seminary in Dubuque, who I lured down here, he is a total atheist. He hates religion. He thinks it's the worst damage. They do the worst damage of any organization in the world. You know, I mean, he hates it. Well, I'm a bad Catholic, maybe, or I'm a cafeteria Catholic with very little. I sip gingerly at the bar, but I still think of myself as a Catholic. So that's it's useless arguing. You know,
there are only two kinds of Catholics. There's devout Catholics and fallen away Catholics. So you fit one category, the other is in it.
I'm on the brink of falling over into the chasm, as Kierkegaard says.
Steve, I wanted to ask you this before. You were at Catholic University, and I don't know if my assessment of Catholic University is correct or not, but my assumption is that they attract a lot of theologians in that university, being the prominent school and being in Washington. What was your experience there? Was religion a integral part of the experience? I know at Bellarmine it was always there, but it wasn't something that was forced upon you. You know, you had to take some theology classes. But was Catholic University any different?
I think it was more like Bellarmine as you describe it. We did have to take some religion courses, but you didn't have to just take theology and dogma. We took, were actually some good academic courses about the history of the scriptures. So, it's more of who wrote them, when were they written, and not so much that it was dogma. It was more of a history course. Mm-hmm. So that they didn't take notes on whether you went to Mass on Sunday, which I didn't. They didn't. Now, the student body, we had about 2,000 undergraduates and about 4,000 graduate students. And the graduate students were predominantly religious, priests, brothers, nuns.
Yeah.
Undergraduate had some of that, but we were just a little separate. Mm. Now, some of our teaching assistants, were the graduate students who were, brothers and nuns. Some of our professors were religious, but not that many. Now we were at, this was 1966, 1970. Of course, when I went there, I was pretty clean cut. I hadn't even started drinking when I was in high school. So in DC, you could drink beer and wine at age 18 legally.
Wow.
So we started doing that legally. We had a pub. We had a Rathskeller pub right on campus that you could go to.
Ed McMahon. I remember that. Ed McMahon helped fund that, I think.
Yeah. And we could go off campus a couple blocks to, sleazy bars and, get cheaper beer than you could at the Rathskeller. But anyway, I was leading that into, it was quite a dramatic change, just everything that was happening. By the time I was a sophomore, everybody was smoking marijuana, and later that year, maybe junior, everybody's taking psychedelics, and we have all of our friends from Louisville coming to join us for Vietnam War protests, on the mall.
Yeah.
My senior year sort of saved me. There were like student walkouts, because of war protests. There was so much disruption to the class, they decided to make all of our classes pass-fail, which is like,
yeah.
Wow.
I was hard on studying.
You were at a hippie university there.
Yeah,
Oh, God, that's night and day difference from my experience 10 years earlier than yours. It was a different world.
It was totally hippie, hair long, beard, whole thing. Student protest in the library, sitting there with our guitars, and okay, did all of that. Now, as time goes by, Catholic youth has become totally conservative. There is no people who and cost about 8 times as much as when we went there. So it's very expensive. It's like Amy Comey Barrett land. Okay.
Well, that's interesting. I think Dave, you mentioned
that's an amazing story, Steve. Thank you.
Dave, you mentioned that you're in the process about 10 years in advance. The one event that occurred in the middle of this, and Larry, you were, I think you were what, 1 or 2 years younger than I am.
Like I'm one
okay.
year.
I couldn't remember there, but the Vatican Council was in the early 60s. And our high school and college years were post-Vatican II. And that made a huge difference in our perception of what the religion was. Prior to that, everything was in Latin. So, you had a struggle to even know what was really being said. And there was not much, exegesis going on. There was not a lot of questioning of or even explanation of the faith. It was, you accept it, you do it, go to confession, take communion, give your money, it was pretty cut and dry. And frankly, it was kind of a comfortable routine, as I remember it. You knew what to expect. You could gut it out and get through the rituals of the seasons. And it's feel pretty good about it. After Vatican II, there were a lot of questions being asked, and it was a lot more demanding. You had to think about stuff. And when we started thinking about stuff, that's when people started leaving. They said, well, come to think of it, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially a lot of priests left. Dave,
Wow.
Dave, I don't know if you realize when we were at Trinity, 3 of us at Trinity, most of our teachers were priests. And they were priests because the archdiocese didn't have enough positions in the parishes to support the number of priests coming out. So we had a lot of, predominant number of teachers I had were priests. And now there are none. there are no priests there at all.
Well, with
Mike,
me,
when
it
I
was all nuns. There were no boys' schools, guy schools, and girls' schools. The Catholic schools, the public schools were all boy girl.
Okay. Yeah.
Never the division that occurred here, and that's a difference in say the Dubuque diocese or Iowa by extension and Louisville. And I found some differences when I came down here. I can't imagine a situation in which they were so overflowing with priests that they didn't know what to do with them. So they said, well, you go teach.
Yeah.
I had the assistant pastor in my little parish high school. That's the only guy we ever saw in the place. You know, a priest, teacher, or brother, or whatever. The rest were Mercy, Sisters of Mercy nuns who were local. Well, there's a
Larry, you had something you wanted to.
Yeah, I can remember that we've had conversations among groups off to the side with some of the priests there. And I remember specifically an exchange with Father Schultz, if you remember him.
Yeah.
And he was convinced that the church was going to allow marriage in the near future, right around the corner. And he was counting on that. I don't know how many kids he has now, but I'm sure he's not a priest. Father Allen was the same way.
Yeah.
Father Voper just dated, so he didn't worry about it.
Yeah. Tony Heitzman was another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
yeah. You know, by the time I came to Louisville, which was about 10 years later when you guys were in college, I guess, everything had changed. This was my first introduction, though. I graduated in 61 from college, 2 years of Catholic school teaching in Illinois and Iowa, and then 2 years of graduate school at the University of Iowa. Then Vista. By the time I came here, suddenly I was in Baltimore in the Vista training. I'm in with Californians and so on. They were carrying weed and so on. So I experienced a massive conversion right there in ironically, an abandoned Catholic school church system in one of the worst areas. It was on the black-white line, very dangerous around there. And we were living on cots in the classrooms, training through the University of Maryland School of Social Work. But it was just like, wow, I stepped into some heaven here.
Yeah.
Except I was a little bit older than, the young ones. But, so I kind of kept, and I was shyer then. I've lost a lot of that now. I just kind of eyes wide open. We ran around Washington, D.C. That's where I thought I was going to be sent. So that would have been like 65. Steve, would that be about right? Another thing I wanted to say, my cousin's kid became a lawyer in Iowa, and then he decided he had a vocation. So they sent him to Catholic University of America. And he ended up thinking it was a really well done program. But today he's the bishop of Davenport, the Davenport Quad Cities there, the Iowa side. It'd be like Lexington or Owensboro or Covington, I guess. I'm still in touch with him, and I still ask him some questions because he knows I'm a bad Catholic. But he's the only liberal in his class of seven. I mean, in his family of 7 or 8 kids. All the others are Republican, and Tom is the one holding out as I probably told you this story. I think Pope Francis pulled him in because he knew that he was the kind of person who years later would be selecting a new pope who's open, liberal. I think that's Francis's game. I've told you guys. But at any rate, Tom said that he thought it was a very good training program, the theology department, and he did his last, it's almost 4 years, 3.5 years ordained following the first 4 years, which was minor seminary, you might say. It's 4 years plus 4 years. They spend a lot of time training. but it was mostly indoctrination in the old days. And I think Tom is, I think he's opening up to a lot of social and, I don't know where he is religiously. I think he's probably right in line with all the, the must believes and the must teaches.
Mhm. I don't know if I seem to have lost Dave there for a moment. I was just thinking that I remember the times in both high school and college when I got into discussions of faith and morality, especially with the priests and some of the nuns that I had as instructors. I didn't feel the same kind of, I was not ill at ease in doing so as I am now with people when the subject of religion comes up. It's almost as though back then it was okay to question and to, talk about your doubts and, things that you can't accept and so forth. That was okay. And you weren't chastised for that. They took the notion that, well, we'll try to fix you perhaps, but was that something common to you guys as well, that as you recall dealing with folks in Catholic educational institutions, is that a different experience than you have now with friends or family or who are still fundamentalist religious folks? Is it any different? I don't know if I phrased the question well, but it feels differently now.
I'm just thinking about the people in my family. It's really not much of an issue because I don't really have any fundamentalists. So we're all sort of in the same area. I mean, I think maybe some of them are a little more into, or I know some of them are a little more into the organized Catholic part of it, but they're not dogmatic.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really come up as a conversation issue, because there's no there's no big disagreement there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We all seem to see things the same way. We really failed with my two kids trying to let them understand the Catholic tradition. They got out much earlier than I did.
Yeah.
Got out of church.
Yeah. I sent all four of my kids to Catholic elementary school, two of them to Catholic high school, one of them to a Catholic college, and none of them have anything to do with the church.
Right.
But the argument that I used to make when I was part of that group is that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense. I always thought of it as like you tell little children something that they're capable of understanding, that Santa Claus is coming to Christmas or whatever it might be. And as they grow, you quit telling them the childish stories. I mean, even St. Paul said this: when I was a child, I thought like a child and I spoke like a child. When I became a man, I no longer did that. Well, I feel like the church never did that second part. They let people stay in that childish belief. And so as a result of that, you have people I know who swear and insist that the ark was a real thing and there were really dinosaurs on there or whatever damn thing they believe. And I don't care about that, but it's hard not to say that's a load of crap when they say it. It's hard to listen to somebody say something that is absolutely wrong without saying something to them about it, without contradicting them. But you realize that it doesn't do any good. So I think most of us are in that situation where we don't agree with them, but we're not going to tell them. It's like with the boss you were talking about, Larry. You're not going to tell him, hey, boss, don't do that crap. We don't want to. No, you go along because you want to get along.
Yeah, I find myself restraining myself from saying something like, what tells you that is true? So it pushes it back on them, and then it opens up a gate, or they have to answer that. So I try not to do that, but I have slipped up on occasion, and it's an uncomfortable thing.
Well, if you try to present a rational argument to an emotional discussion, it misses the point. I think the same thing is true in science. That I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about this many times. That he doesn't want to debate evolution with people. It's like, if you don't understand it, just forget it. What am I supposed to say? I'm not gonna persuade you to change your belief. If you haven't accepted it by now, you're not going to.
Right.
But it's difficult. You sort of feel an obligation, or at least I do, that when someone says something that's not true, you want to present them with what you think are the facts. But then that might be, for me being a little arrogant in doing so. So, they just shut your mouth and don't say anything. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Right.
That's why I wanted to bring this topic up, because I feel comfortable talking with you guys about it.
Yeah, well, if there's a way that you can, this goes back to some of the problems we have with the whole Trump administration and alternate facts. If we can agree on what the truth is, then you got a basis for, there's still going to be uncertainty, even though there's certain truths. There's still going to be uncertainty about what's the best thing to do with these truths in front of us. We can guess the right way to address climate change or crime or whatever it is. But if you can't agree on what the truth is about the problem, you're in big trouble. I was just listening today. You're familiar with Lucinda Williams?
Yeah.
Whatever, I don't know what to call her, country rock blues singer. Anyway, the song I was listening to today was something like, everything changes, everything changes, everything changes but the truth. Yeah, but can you agree on the truth?
Well, that's it. I think to explore the truth, you have to begin from a blank slate. You can't start pursuing the truth with a whole lot of presumptuous ideas that, well, we know that the earth is the center of the universe, so now let's move on. No, you have to say, I don't know. Nobody knows. I used to enjoy taking philosophy classes at school, because we could talk about things as though nothing was ever proven ever. So you started with a blank slate, and you say, well, what is observable, and what can you say about it? And what I want to tell people is that there's nothing wrong with religion if this is 400 BC or something. There's nothing wrong with someone trying to present you with an explanation of the unexplainable. Who are you? Where are you? What is this universe? Where did it come from? Where is it going to? All the big questions. There's nothing wrong with religion, in the same way that there's nothing wrong with plowing a field with a mule. It's just not the most, it's not the most effective way now. There are other ways that make more sense now. And I tend to think that science has replaced religion as the way to explain things. And I pretty much accept that. And the thing I like most about science is that they don't insist on dogma. They say, well, this is what we think a black hole is, but we're open to a new understanding of that. There may be something we don't know yet. But if you approach the world from that idea that none of us really know, and we're all on the road to understanding, it doesn't mean that a theory is just a theory and not true. It could be true, but your understanding, your grasping of it is an evolving thing. It should grow. And if you could engage people in religion that way and say, okay, let's suppose we were starting a new religion today, and we didn't have any of the Moses stories or the Jesus stories, and we wanted to have something to cope with the spiritual, conundrum of being a sentient human being who's going to die someday and having to cope with all that. What do you do? I think that could be a good discussion, and you could draw upon the history of religion to begin to formulate something new. But You know, I struggled with that for a long time. I guess I've told you guys at this point in life, you end up repeating yourself, but just I used to talk to folks about miracles all the time. I remember talking about the miracle of the wedding feast where Jesus is supposed to change wine into water. And to me, the miracle was he handed them a cup and said, taste this great wine. And it was a glass of water. And they tasted, oh, wonderful wine. And they were doing it to save face for the bridegroom. It was not, wow, zap, there's a Merlot. You know, it was, here is a miracle of someone putting someone else's needs ahead of their own and everybody agreeing to it. You know, loaves and fishes the same way. That, you know, there are ways of looking at that don't have to be miraculous. They're simply, you know, a good story and a good way to behave. I mean, you know, you run into situations like that all the time. Back with us, Dave. We lost you there.
Yeah. Hey, that's so interesting. Yesterday, our Bible discussion group, these, you know, really conservative people, it was the loaves and the fishes story. You know, he'd learned about John the Baptist being beheaded and that awful thing. So Jesus, being upset, says the chapter, went off to solitary to surely to mourn. He was a human being, as they say. But then the people were gathering and they found the boy with well, let's feed him. So Jesus said, you know, okay, we'll spread them out. Well, one of the guys kind of amazed me. They were talking about, the miracle, you know, this is the greatest miracle ever. Well, if it's true, it probably was. Question is it true? Is it metaphorical? Is it whatever? But one of the guys said, I have a different theory. This is one of the fundamentalists who happens to be an engineer. And I think he's kind of a closet, well, I wonder, maybe a bit of a progressive, who knows? He said, my theory is that, he said, yeah, there were the loaves and the fishes went out, but here's one young boy among 10,000. He said, people aren't that dumb. They would have brought food along. Some of them, yeah, just in case, you know? So he said, my theory is they started passing out the loaves and the fish, the 2 fish, but then other people said, I've got some picnic basket here. I've got this and that, and so on. Yeah. Well, the other 2, the pastor, the young pastor, and my friend, the retired military guy, they were a little aghast. You know, wow. It was really interesting to watch and how they handled the shock of never thought about it, you know. People have had candy bars in their pocket. You know,
I think that is such a more appealing story, and it's
isn't that
it's something that could win people over because it says you don't have to believe in the absurd. There is an explanation that is just as marvelous, but it's not magic. You know, it's a marvelous thing. There's so many things in life that are truly marvelous, but they're not magic. Watching your child be born is a marvelous thing. It's not magic, you know, but doesn't take away the so-called miracle of birth. You know, so that understanding of, you know, the faith evolved to try to pass. I always felt like there's a kernel of truth that's passed through the centuries, and most people misinterpret it, but somehow it manages to get through. I don't know if you ever read the book Canticle for Leibowitz.
Oh yeah,
it's that story. The very quick summary: a person discovers a document, the beautiful document, and it's worshipped basically. And in the end, the document turns out to be a technical manual for some kind of tool, but they were worshiping the document because it looks so great. So there's this idea that you get on this notion of the miracle, and that's what gives you faith. Well, that's pretty shallow. You know, that doesn't take much. If something like that really happened, you know, and I could see, you know, fish multiply in front of me, I'd probably die of a heart attack, but I don't, you know, I wouldn't doubt it, but I don't have to have it in order to understand the message. And at least I don't think I do. So
Mm. Mm.
Well, I struggle with this. I hope this has been a helpful thing. I don't know if everyone gets bothered by it as I do. Marcia and I went round and round about this the other night, and she has a very valid point that pointing out somebody's failings in terms of their faith is not a very nice thing to do, you know. So she has a friend who, when I was in hospital a couple of weeks ago, wants to come up and anoint me with oil or something. So please don't ever do that. I really don't want. Just tell her I can't have visitors or something.
Not that far
But we don't
gone.
want to hurt her feelings. She's a really nice lady. She's very kind to Marcia and has been a very good friend. But what she believes is batshit crazy. But I don't want to confront her about it. I don't know if we'll ever resolve this if we can't have the honest conversation.
Yeah, I think the secret is to become more Zen and just say, "Oh, that's what you believe." And how interesting, the challenging. That's why I'll read the piece that Dustin sent along. But I've decided to stop being mean to these guys ever.
Yeah.
If that's what you believe, that's fine. But if you want to talk about it, I'll tell you why I don't believe it. I think that's our duty, is to say, if it comes to that, here's what I think and here's why I think it.
Yeah.
I'd also like to say that what I find with these Christian churches, and I'm involved with the pastors of about, and a few of the congregation, I just go to their service, get acquainted, and I'm trying to bring the neighborhood association into kind of kumbaya with these churches, because they're all reaching out. They want to do well for the community. So I said, why can't we work together? We're in the secular world. You guys are in the spiritual world. But I see that they, unlike the Catholic churches I know, they're constantly reaching out and they're doing things for people. They take care of the homeless. They go clean up areas in the West End. They've got missions all the time, and these people are out there doing it because, as the pastor says, and these guys say, this is the Christian thing. You're in with Jesus. You're a believer. There you are. But what would Jesus want you to do? What he did was take care of people. He healed people. He helped people, and so on. They're doing it, and that's something that is harder and harder for me to ignore. Why aren't the Catholics doing that?
Well, I think some are.
Maybe they are, but I don't see it.
I think as maybe an institution that the Catholics have, is a gross overgeneralization, that there's a formula that it takes to get to God. You do these things, you manage your church going, you manage your personal behavior and your belief and whatever, and you got yourself a pretty good chance of getting into the right gates when you go. And so that's the path. And the church has made it, salvation, so formalized, do these things and you're going to be okay, that a lot of folks just do those things, and they don't get into the brotherhood and the community service kind of thing so much.
Interesting.